This is Obsidian ASMR. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for future videos. Hey, and welcome to part 3 of our PlayStation 2 collection series. Now, I told you that this was going to be a big one, and I think that is a testament to the success of the PlayStation 2 console and its longevity. And if you are stumbling across this video for the first time, I would recommend you go back and have a look at part 1 and part 2, as well as this, and maybe a part 4 if that comes out. Who knows? So, with that being said, let's get into it. The first set of games I want to talk about are Ratchet and Clank, the original trilogy. I've got a bit of a story for Ratchet and Clank, again by Insomniac Games, who have cranked out some really, really impressive titles. But Ratchet and Clank is a kind of third-person platforming shooter, adventure style sandbox game. That's a long explanation. Where you follow Ratchet and Clank. The first game came out in 2002. And I remember being in, of all places, a Halfords in the UK. And a Halfords is like a car manufacturer or repair shop, parts, that kind of thing. They do mostly cars, but they also do other stuff like bicycles, motorbikes, and weirdly, I think they do some sporting equipment in the bigger stores, or at least they used to. But I remember going in there with my dad, and they had one of those PlayStation 2 kiosks set up with Ratchet and Clank playing, or a demo of it, and I thought it was amazing. Then again, I was very young, but if anything, it was my dad that called me over to have a look at it, and I got playing while he was talking about his car or whatever to the person behind the desk, the counter. And I remember having a really, really fun time. So, in the store there and then, he bought me this copy of Ratchet and Clank, and I haven't gotten rid of it since. I played through the entirety of the first game, leveled up the weapons, met Skid McMarks, and saved the universe from the bad guy who, I forget what his name was. It wasn't Captain Quark. Chemendrek, that's it. And yeah, I then got into Ratchet and Clank 2, but I don't remember much about this one, other than it was very, very similar to the first one. I mean, it only came out a year later. An interesting thing about Ratchet and Clank is they do have titles in the sequels that are kind of like a double entendre, a double meaning. So for kids, it's harmless, but for adults, they get the joke. Obviously, Skid McMarks is a reference to skid marks. All you've got to do there is Google it on Urban Dictionary and you'll figure out what it means. But the UK title for Ratchet and Clank 2 is different to the US title. I'm pretty sure Ratchet and Clank 3 was called Up Your Arsenal, which, you know, if you take the last syllable of that phrase out, you can probably get the intended title. I have to say, I didn't play Ratchet and Clank 3 that much. I think I got about halfway through, locked and loaded. I can't remember exactly what the story is. I think it's a professor asks for your help trying to track down an experiment or a pet or something, and it turns out to be a deception by a familiar face, I think. And then I think Dr. Nefarious shows up in this one, from what I remember. I could be wrong. No, yeah, I'm right. Dr. Nefarious. So, they redid the original something like 15 years later on the PlayStation 4, and that was with a tie-in film. I played through that as well, and whilst the storyline was slightly altered, it was a loving remake of the original game. I would love to see a HD remaster of all three of these, quite like they did with Spyro and Crash. And I feel like that might be something that Sony and the PlayStation bosses look to do now that Spyro and Crash are Microsoft exclusive, which is madness to me. So, I would give this one a 10 out of 10. I would give this one a 9 was 7 because I didn't play it that much. But I will never, ever, ever forget the wonderment and awe I felt playing the initial couple of missions and story mode, story worlds in Ratchet and Clank. Visiting those different planets felt so grandiose and spectacular. And whilst they had that kind of loading screen, I think, where you had to shoot enemy spaceships to travel between worlds. When you actually got on those worlds, it was vibrant, and the platforming was weirdly quite good for a 3D environment, and for a PlayStation 2 game. It was more something that you would expect from a PlayStation 1 game. And so, I think that's all I've got to say about Ratchet and Clank. 10, 8, 7. Next up is a eclectic game, but one that I am incredibly surprised that that's got a remaster in the last couple of years, which is Pac-Man World 2. My grandfather got me this game. And you know, I was young and I thought Pac-Man was iconic, which he is. But I never heard of Pac-Man World, let alone Pac-Man World 2. And it was not what I was expecting. It was a platformer. And I didn't get very far through it. But I do remember it being one of my school friends' favourite games to play when he came over. And we'd always try and get a little bit further with Pac-Man. I'm just kind of flabbergasted that 20 years later, last year, 2022, they remastered it. I thought it didn't sell very well, but I could be wrong. I don't remember much, but it was Pac-Man as a Crash Bandicoot style platformer, and as you can probably tell, I'm into platformers. I think I'd give it a 5 out of 10. And I think I've held on to it because of that kind of emotional tie, being a game my grandfather bought me, and those kind of unique memories with my school friend. I haven't played it in years. Next, we've talked about them before, and we'll talk about them again. Tekken. So, Tekken 4 was the first Tekken game I ever bought. And I remember the cinematics being very face and very cool. So, I think we'll do what we did last time and read through a bit of the reasoning as to why these Tekken tournaments have taken place. So, I can't remember which one chronologically was first. I feel like this came out in 1999, maybe. Whereas this one came out in 2001, I think. Yeah. And this one came out like 4 years later. So, I think the Tekken Tag tournament was I think it was just arcade. I think. But I could be wrong. I don't think it's saying anything. In this, it's just giving a rundown of the, oh no, here you go. So you got Jin Kazama, Paul Phoenix, Forest Law, Lei Wulong, King, Nina Williams, Yoshimitsu, Mechanical Space Ninja, cool, Ling Xiaoyu, Huarang, Eddie Gordo, Julia Chang, Gunjack, Jun Kazama, Baekdo-san, Armor King, and Ganryu. Have you got 2 types of king in this? Yeah, you do. Oh, sorry, and Brian Fury and Heihachi Mishima. It doesn't look like there was much of a story to Tekken Tag tournament. And honestly, I'd probably give it a 5. I didn't play it much. But these two are the main storyline games, and I remember the opening cinematic to Tekken 4, where Heihachi is standing over like a crater, I think, or like a crater, I guess. And this hooded figure returns. Let's see what it says on the back. Not much. But we do have this Ogre's Legacy. 2 years have passed since the King of the Iron Fist Tournament 3. In a blaze of publicity, the itself as the top prize in the forthcoming King of the Iron Fist tournament form. The champion who manages to defeat Heihachi at the end of the tournament will inherit the entire Mishima Empire. But Heihachi has his reasons for offering such a lavish prize. Craving the escaped ogre's devil gene, Heihachi is determined to lure another devil gene carrier out of the shadows, his grandson, Jin Kazama. But is there another, more rightful heir to the Mishima throne waiting in the wings? Kazuya Mishima, Steve Fox, British boxing champion. Britain represent. Craig Marduk. Christy Montero, Paul Phoenix, Martial Law, King, Ling Xiaoyu, again, Huarang, and Yoshimitsu. I think you can unlock more of the characters. But this was one of the games that got me into kind of like fighting games, along with Dragon Ball. So I'd probably give this a 7, I think. Before we move on to the big one, Tekken 5. The ninja hones his reflexes, the boxer clenches his fists, the wrestler flexes his muscles, the assassin takes aim, and the most powerful fighter in Tekken history awaits the winner, vowing vengeance, delivering destruction. The King of the Iron Fist tournament returns. All I remember with this one is that they added in a different style of fighting where you play as Jin Kazama, I think. And you're just coming up against like loads of enemies in a kind of JRPG style, Final Fantasy style. And it was good. It just detracted, I think, from the main game, unless you're into that kind of thing. And I have played a couple of the Final Fantasies. Notably, I think it's 13, with Lightning. I got pretty far through that, but they're not my style of game. So, whilst this is the last Tekken game I bought, I would say, it's probably a 7 or an 8 again. The graphics were much better, the gameplay felt more fluid, but I just feel, for me anyway, 3, Hoodlum Havoc, Rayman Revolution, and Rayman M. So I think I'm going to start with Rayman Revolution. Because if I remember correctly, Rayman Revolution is like a next-gen remake of Rayman 2, I think. So, if you wanted to play Rayman 2, but get a better experience with better graphics, I would recommend Rayman Revolution. I think that's the correct way to say it. I didn't really play it too much, so I think I'd give it a 5. For me, anyway. Rayman M is effectively a racing game. Where you basically play in gladiatorial, forgive me, arenas and racetracks. And it's a bit like Crash Bash, where you can unlock different characters, and it's basically just you have to know where you're going, what you're doing, and do it the quickest while tripping up your opponents. It's a bit like Mario Kart fused with Crash Bash. It was fine, it didn't really do much for me. It was a gift again, so I'll probably give this another 5. However, Rayman 3 Hoodlum Havoc came out in 2003, and I remember this was really big. Like, there was a big marketing campaign all around the game, and the storyline was great. And Rayman got all of these like cool additions to his gloves, and the platforming was pretty good. You know, like, as it says there, shock rockets, lockjaw, vortex fist, mini shoe car, funky boards, etc. And I never got through to the very, very end to defeat the hoodlums. But I didn't realise it was a game that one of my best friends really enjoyed as well. A couple of years ago we had a bit of a PlayStation 2 renaissance and talked through tried to get through the game. Didn't get through it all, but did a fair bit. I wanted to complete it, but at the time I was moving on to something else for my gameplay, so I'd probably give it a 7 out of 10. And I'm trying to recall what happens in it, glow box and stuff like that. But I just can't seem to remember that much about it. Remember the box art, because it was iconic at the time. But that's about it. And the swinging, using the different like fist power-ups. shot by one of these guys. So yeah, that's a 7 for me. And then, so, the final one for today is Scarface, The World Is Yours, which is a lot like The Godfather, the game, but based off of the film Scarface with Tony Montana. And you play through the key elements of the story, trying to rise from, well, it starts out really weirdly because you kind of like begin at the end, and then you play through the steps of the movie to get back to where you were. It was okay. But it's weird. I think I got that slightly wrong. You start out at the end of the original movie, Scarface, and then it turns out that you didn't die, or Tony Montana didn't die at the end of the movie, and instead you spend all of this game rebuilding your empire to take down Sosa. It was okay. It wasn't my favourite, but it wasn't my least favourite Mafia game. I think for me, The Godfather and The Godfather Part 2 are still my favourites. All I can say is there's nothing that really stands out as unique about Scarface from what I can remember. I can remember bits of the story of Mafia 2, but I don't remember much about this. So I think what I'd say is I'd give it a 7 out of 10. It's fine, but it isn't The Godfather. If you wanted more Tony Montana, this is for you. But I don't think it reinvents the wheel. And if I remember correctly, this came out the year after The Godfather. And to me, that was still the superior game. I think. I could be wrong. And I could be just mixing things up. But I think that's the case. And so, with that, we reach the end of part 3. There will be a part 4 that comes out next week. But for now, thank you all so much for watching. Thank you so much for your support, your likes, your comments, let me know if you want